So, I think most of the web page functionality is pretty much done with. So, the tutorial is going to take me through testing and stuff. And then, here's a plan after I finish this. I'm gonna build like not gonna build. I'm gonna learn how React and stuff works. And then as soon as I do that, which is right now it's 29th July, so I'm hoping by 15th August I would have done learning React. And from day after tomorrow, I have another Python project coming up, which is my algorithmic trading project. I'm much more proficient at Python than I am at JavaScript because I just started JavaScript like some time ago. But the whole idea is that once I finish this course, which is I have 7 hours left, so 3 days. I'm gonna do 3 like 5 hour or 6 hour sessions, 15 hours. 7 hours left plus like all the tutorials and actually understanding. I just don't want to like follow it blindly because that makes no sense to me. So once I finish this course, I'm gonna do React for maybe a week or two, some like Tailwind and stuff. I mean, to be honest, there's a lot to do, but I'm hoping by the end of August, around August 30th. Then after August, I have September, October, November, December. I'm here for another 4 months before I head back to college in the US. So I'm hoping by the end of August, I've done enough to actually go out and start building like some product, like any product, like a failed SaaS of all I care. Like I know the first one isn't gonna work out, or at least chances are the first one isn't gonna work out. But I'm saying I'm just gonna go out and build something. Yeah, I'm just gonna go out and build something so that we don't have like. I think that's okay. Yeah, I added a noise suppression filter so you guys don't hear the fan. So I'm gonna build something, uh, and hopefully. Sorry, I was just messing with the filters. I'm gonna have the ability to build something by the end of August. I should have enough information about React or Express.js and how to like handle like Node.js and stuff. And then I need to learn like Tailwind CSS and like some like basic HTML. Even though I know a lot of basic HTML, I think Tailwind is important because I don't know how to design web pages. I don't know how to center divs and do the whole flexbox thing and stuff. So I'm hoping by the end of August I have enough information to actually start building something, and then I'm just gonna build it from there and see what it's like. And the reason I'm giving it 1 month is because for the next couple of days, like I said, I'm gonna be working on this Python project, which is also pretty important. So let's see. Right now I just started. It's been 5 minutes since the stream started. I'm gonna try to get out like 5 hours of work today. It's 6:35 p.m. in the evening, so maybe 2 hours now, or maybe an hour and a half now to like 8, eat some dinner, and then another like 2 to 3 hours in the evening. So realistically, I can only do 4 5 hours because I got a little busy with my family in the afternoon. But yeah, let's just get started.
storage. To fix this, you can try running local of this course. If you get an error
There we go.
in the rest of this course, if you get an error in your project, but your code looks correct, you may have some bad data to clear in your console to remove everything from local storage, and then refresh the page. If you see an error like this, object object, that means that you saved something directly into local storage, but you have to JSON.stringify it first. So check your code to make sure that you refresh the page. So when we're writing code, it's important to test our code to see if it's working correctly. And if you're working at a company in the future, you'll also be expected to test your code. So let's learn how to do that in this lesson. The easiest way to test our code is to just open the website and try out the code. For example, in our code here, let's open the file utils/money.js. And then inside this file, we have a function called format currency. So let's say we want to test format currency. How do we check if this is working correctly? So as I mentioned, the easiest way to test this is to just open our website and try out this code. So let's open the website. If you don't have the website open, you can right-click checkout.html and then click Open with Live Server. So on this website, we have a couple of prices here, as well as here. And we created these prices using the function format currency. So if we just look at the website, we can see that these prices look correct. And this tells us that the function format currency is working correctly. So that's one way to test that function. We just open the website and try it out. So this is called manual testing, when we manually open the website and try our code. So manual testing is really useful for quickly checking to see if everything is working. So now let's talk about the disadvantages of manual. However, what if we want to test with different numbers? In order to those number situations. However, we did not cover 2000.5, so we had to do a bunch of setup in order to test that situation. So as you can see, it takes a lot of time and effort to test different situations in our code. The second disadvantage of manual testing is that it's hard to retest the code. For example, if we change some of our code, how do we retest format currency and make sure that it's still working correctly? Well, we would have to open the website and set up all the situations again and retest all the situations manually. So this takes too much time and effort to retest the code. To solve these two problems, we're going to learn another way to test our code called automated testing. Automated testing basically means using code to test code. Instead of manually opening the website and clicking around to try our code, we're going to tell the computer to do these tests for us, and this will save a lot of time and effort. So let's go ahead and create our first automated test. We're going to go back to our code, and again, let's test this format currency function. To create an automated test, we're just going to write some code to test this function. So first, let's create a folder to group all of our test code together. We're going to click this icon to create a folder, and let's just name this tests, and press enter. And we're going to move this folder, so we'll drag it to the top level here, beside the HTML files. So we want the test folder to be beside the scripts folder. Next, let's click on the test folder, and we're going to create our first test file. We'll click this, and we're going to test format currency, which is inside the money.js file. So let's name this file money.test.js. So we know that this file contains tests for money.js. So let's press enter. And inside this file, we're going to write some code to test format currency. So first, let's import format currency so we can test it. At the top, we'll type import curly brackets format currency from a string, and from here, we're going to locate money.js. So we start.
Rid of this, and this must be the changes.
start out in moneytest.js, and we need to get out of the test folder. So we'll type dot dot slash to get out of this folder, and then we'll go into the scripts folder. Scripts slash and then into the utils folder, utils slash and locate money.js. So as a reminder, format currency takes a number in cents, like 2,095 cents, and then converts it into dollars, like $20.95. So first, let's test this function using that number 2,095 as an example. We're going to run the function format currency brackets and give it 2,095. And now we're going to check if the result of this function is correct. To do that, we can just use an if statement. So we'll type if, open bracket, close bracket, and we said we expect format currency 2095 to give us the string 20.95. So we're just going to check if this is triple equals to the string 20.95 and curly brackets. And if these two are equal, that means the code is working correctly. So we're going to console.log the string passed to say that this test has passed. Now, if it is not equal to 20.95, we're going to say that this test has failed. So we're going to give it an else curly brackets, and then here we're going to console.log the string failed and save. And that's it. This is our first automated test. It checks if the result of this function is correct. If it is correct, we're going to display passed, and if it's not correct, we're going to display failed. Now let's run this test code. So remember, we can't run JavaScript files directly. We need to load this JavaScript file using an HTML file. So let's create an HTML file to run this test. Inside the test folder, we're going to create a new file by clicking up here. And let's name this file tests.html and press enter. And in here, we're going to start by creating a basic HTML structure. So as a reminder, at the top, we'll type ! doc type space HTML greater than, and we'll create an HTML element. And then inside, we'll create a head element, as well as a body element. And then inside the body, we're going to create a script tag to run JavaScript code. And we're going to give the script tag an attribute called src or source equals double quotes, and we're going to give it this JavaScript file to run, moneytest.js. And also, because this file uses import, we also need to add an attribute called type equals module to give this file access to JavaScript module features like import. So now let's save, and we're going to run this file in live server. So we're going to click it and then right click, open with live server. And then we're going to check the console by right clicking, inspect, and open the console. And our code displays the text passed. So if we look at our code and open moneytest.js, it's telling us that the result of this function matched what we expected, and this test passed. So that's how we run an automated test. We just load it like normal JavaScript. So as you can see, automated tests are pretty straightforward. We're just using code to test code. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that a disadvantage of manual testing is it's hard to test every situation. Now let's solve this problem using automated tests. So inside moneytest.js, if we want to test format currency in different situations or with different numbers, we can just add some more tests at the bottom. So at the bottom, let's create some new lines, and we'll just add another test using if, brackets, and curly brackets. And inside here, let's test format currency with the number 0. So we'll type format currency, brackets, 0, and we expect this result to be the string 0.00. So we'll check if this triple equals the string 0.00. If this result matches, we're going to console.log dot log the string passed. And if this result does not match, we're going to type else, curly brackets, and console dot log the string failed. So that's how we test format currency in a different situation with the number 0. So now let's save and then go back to our test page, which is here, and then open the console, right-click, inspect the console, and it will tell us that both of our automated tests passed. So as you can see, automated tests help us test our code in different situations very easily. This is a lot faster than manually opening our website and setting it up to test with different numbers. So let's go back to our code. And by the way, another name for a situation that we're testing is called a test case. So here, instead of saying we're testing 2 different situations, we usually say we're testing 2 test cases. Okay, now let's get more practice and add another test case. At the bottom of this file, we're going to create another if statement, if brackets and curly brackets. And this time, let's test format currency brackets, and we'll give it a number that requires some rounding. So when we calculate the 10% tax on our website, the result could be a decimal, like the number 2000.5. If we use the number 2000.5, this will convert into $20 and 0.5 cents. However, we can't have 0.5 cents, so we're going to round this up to 1 cent. So we're going to have $20 and 1 cent. So let's check if this result triple equals the string 20.01. And if it is equal, we're going to console.log passed. And if it is
Oh, my cough.
not equal, else curly brackets console.log failed, and save. And open our test page, and open the console. And you can see that all 3 of our test cases passed. And that's it. We just created 3 test cases for format currency using automated tests. Now let's go back to our code. And currently, we have 3 test cases. And you might be wondering, how many test cases should we have? Generally, we create 2 types of test cases: basic test cases and edge cases. A basic test case just tests if the code is working or not. So here, our first test case is a basic currency cases. This means we test the code with values that are a little bit tricky. They're on the edge of what our code can handle. For example, in our test here, the last 2 test cases are edge cases. 0 is sort of a special number that's not positive or negative. Numbers are what our basic test case. So we don't mix 2000 and 0. It's hard to read. Let's say that we change the and the brackets here. We remove this rounding and then click around to. So let's go back to my page, console, to make which one of these test cases a name. So above the first test case, let's just console.log a string, and we're going to give this test. And that's how we give the test case a name. Going to describe the functions and which test case failed. So this moved math.round as an example. We're just going to add it back to fix that failing test. Capital M math. Another thing, these 3 test cases are for the format currency function. So we're going to group these tests together and give this group a name. By the way, a group of related tests is called a test suite, and a string console at calculate how we create it working correctly. Currency, and then we created an HTML file to load our test code. So let's create a message describing these changes. Create automated tests for format currency and commit. Next, we're going to learn how to use a testing framework to write automated tests. So what is a testing framework? In the previous lesson, we learned about external libraries, which is code that is outside of our project that someone else wrote, and we can load external libraries into our project and use them. So a testing framework is an external library that helps us write test.js file. And notice that in our tests, we need to do several things. First, we create it. So now let's learn our first testing framework. In this course, we're going to use a popular testing framework called Jasmine. Now, if you're working at a company in the future, you'll definitely be using a testing framework, but it might not always be Jasmine. And that's okay, because most testing frameworks are pretty similar. So by learning Jasmine, you'll be able to easily use other testing frameworks in the future. To load Jasmine into our project, we're going to go into the video description, and we're going to click this link to download Jasmine. So once that link opens, we're going to be on this page, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to click this jasmine-standalone.zip file to help you practice what we learned in this lesson. Open our download folder. So once that link opens, we're going to be on this page, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to click this jasmine-standalone.zip file to download it. Now, once that's finished downloading, we're going to open our downloads folder. And if you're on Windows, we're going to right-click the zip file and click Extract All, and click Extract. And click Extract All, and click Extract. Now, if you don't have that Extract All option, you can also create a folder with this name, and then double-click the zip file and drag everything into that folder. If you're using a Mac, you can just double-click the zip file into that folder with this name, and then double-click the the zip file and drag everything into that folder. If you're using a Mac, you can just double-click the zip file. So this folder contains the code for Jasmine, and we're going to drag this folder into our project. So let's open the code for our project, and then we're just going to drag this folder down here and click Copy Folder. So just make sure that this folder is beside the scripts and images folder. Next, we're going to rename this folder. So we'll right-click, rename, and let's rename it to tests-jasmine. To make it clear, this folder contains tests created with Jasmine. So now let's press enter. And now we have...
Okay, something crashed. Okay. Yep. Okay, VS Code. Let's call this. VS Code crashed on me, that's okay though. So again, this. There we go, that worked.
Have Jasmine inside our project. So inside the lib folder, we have some JavaScript files here, and this is the code for the Jasmine testing framework. So this is another way to load an external library into our project. We can just download all the code and put it into our project. And this is useful if an external library has lots of different files like this. Before we continue, let's save the changes into Git. So if we make any changes later, it will be easier to see them. We'll open the Git section, and then we just added all the code for Jasmine. So at the top, let's type the message, add Jasmine testing framework, and commit. Now that we loaded Jasmine into our project, let's learn how to use it. So Jasmine has a documentation page that shows you how to use the testing framework. However, to save time, I'm just going to show you the features that we need, and you can read the documentation later if you want. So first, let's learn how to run tests using Jasmine. I'm going to close this for now, and then in our code, we're going to open the test-jasmine folder, and at the bottom, we're going to open this spec runner.html file. So this file loads all of the tests. So this does the same thing as our test.html file from before. And by the way, in Jasmine, spec is another name for test. So spec runner just means test runner. This file runs all the tests. So let's actually rename this file to test.html so we can match what we had before and compare the two. So here we're going to right-click and rename tests.html and press enter. And now let's open this file and take a look at the code that's inside. So here at the top, this is the code for the Jasmine testing framework. So we're just loading the framework up here. Below that, here we have the code that we want to test. So this code is sort of like the money.js file that we were testing earlier. And then at the bottom, these files contain the tests. So these files are sort of like the money test.js file that we had earlier. And you notice that these are in a spec folder. So below that, here, click and rename tests.html and press enter. Up here. Below that, here, so we're just loading the framework up here. Below that, here, we have the code earlier. Those are sort of like the reminder in Jasmine folder, and to do that, we just need to open this HTML file. So now let's run these tests, and to do that, we just need to open this HTML file in Live Server, just like we did before. So for this file, we're going to right-click and open with Live Server. And I'm just going to make this a little bigger by pressing Control equals, so it's easier to see in the video. So this is what Jasmine tests look like. Up here, we have 5 green dots. This means we have 5 tests that we ran, and the green color means that all of them passed. So down here, each test has a green dot, And you'll notice that each test also has a name next to it, which tells us what the test does. And don't worry if this is in a different order for you. Jasmine randomizes the order of the tests. Also notice that some of these tests are grouped together into a test suite. And up here, we have the name of the test suite. So as you can see, a testing framework helps us do all of the things we were doing before. And it also provides a nice looking website where we can see the test results. So a testing framework is just an external library that helps us write tests easier. Now that we know what Jasmine and a testing framework is, let's learn how to write our tests using Jasmine. First, we're going to go back to our code. And we're going to remove the example code provided by Jasmine. So down here, we'll remove these 4 script tags. And let's also remove the source folder. So we'll right-click delete, as well as the spec folder. Right-click,
Wait, what did I?
delete. But make sure we keep this lib folder because this contains the code for Jasmine. And now inside test-jasmine, we're going to create a new file for our tests. So we'll create a new file. And let's say that we're testing money.js again. So let's name it the same thing here, money test.js, and press enter. And now let's create the same test we had before, but using Jasmine this time. So to make it easier for the video, I'm just going to take this file and drag it to the top here, so we can see these two side by side. So like before, we're going to create tests for format currency. First, we'll need to import this function at the top. So let's just actually select this and right-click, copy, and then down here, right-click and paste. And just make sure that this file path still works. So our money test.js file has to be inside test-jasmine. And this folder should be beside the previous test folder. Next, we're going to create a test suite and name the test suite. So in Jasmine, to create a test suite, we're going to use a function called describe. So this describe function is provided by Jasmine, and it creates a test suite. Next, we're going to give a name to the test suite. So to name a test suite in Jasmine, we're going to give describe a string. And this string is the name of the test suite. So let's name it the same thing as before. Test suite colon format currency. Next, we're going to add some tests inside the test suite. To do that, we're going to give describe a second parameter, which is a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And inside here, we're going to create a test and give the test a name. To create a test in Jasmine, we're going to use another function called it and brackets. So it is another function provided by Jasmine, and this creates a test. Next, let's give a name to our test so that we know what it's doing. To name a test, we're going to give it a string, and this is going to be the test name. So let's name it the same thing we had before, converts cents into dollars. And now we're going to add some code into our tests. To do that in Jasmine, we're going to give it a second parameter, which is another function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. So this is the code inside the test. And in this test, we need to compare these two values and display the result. In Jasmine, instead of creating an if statement and displaying the result ourselves, Jasmine provides us another function to do all of this. And that function is called expect and brackets. So expect lets us compare a value to another value. For example, let's give expect the first value that we want to compare, which is format currency 2095. So we'll type format currency brackets 2095. And now to compare this value to another value, expect gives us an object. And this object has many methods we can use to do comparisons. So one of the methods we can use in this object is dot to equal brackets. And then inside these brackets, we'll put another value that we want to compare this to. So we want to compare this to the string 20.95. And that's it. This checks if this value is equal to this value, and then displays the result on the page. So it does everything that we did before, except with one line of code. And you'll also notice that Jasmine's code is designed so that it reads like English. For example, we expect format currency 2095 to equal this string. And this makes the test code easier to read. So we just created our first test suite and our first test using Jasmine. Now let's run this test. To do that, we just need to run this JavaScript file inside test.html. So first let's save this file, and then inside test.html, we're going to load this file. So in here, at the bottom, we're going to create a script tag, and we'll give it a source attribute, src equals double quotes, and we're going to load moneytest.js, test.js. And remember, our test file uses import, so we also need to give it the attribute type equals module. So this file has access to JavaScript module features. So now let's save and we'll open this file in our browser. So we should have it open from before. If you don't, you can right-click and open with Live Server. So we'll open the test page, and now you can see that we have our one test that we created here, and it's passing, so it's green. You can see here that we created a test suite with a name, and we also created a test with this name. So we just created the first test that we had before, except using Jasmine this time. And you can see that Jasmine also creates a nice website for us to see the test results. Okay, now that we learned how to use Jasmine to create a test, let's get some practice and create the rest of our tests from before. We'll go back to our code and open moneytest.js. And here, we're going to create the other two tests that we had here. So at the bottom, inside the same test suite, we're going to create another test using the function it, brackets, and we'll give it a string, which is the test name, and let's name it the same as before. Works with 0, comma, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And now we can put something inside this test. So inside the second test, we're going to compare these two values.
Also, we expect format currency dot, because we want it to equal, right, we want it to equal to string 0.00. I think I'm not sure.
To compare values, we're going to use the function expect, brackets, and the first value is going to be format currency plus an object, which lets us compare this value to another value, 0.00. And now let's say using Jasmine. Another test inside this test suite using the function it, brackets, and a string, and we'll give it the same test name as before. Rounds up to the nearest cent, comma, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And we're going to compare these two values. So we use expect, brackets, and give it the first value, format currency, brackets, 2000.5, and to compare it, we'll use the method dot to equal, brackets, and compare it to 20.01, and save. And let's go back to our test page. And now we have 3 tests, and all 3 of them passed. So we recreated the tests that we had before. Now let's try making one of these tests fail to see what it looks like in Jasmine. We'll open our code, and let's open the file utils/money.js. And just like before, let's try removing this math.round function and remove the brackets here to make one of the tests fail. So we'll save and then open our test page. And now it will tell us that one of our tests failed. And here it will show us the details of the failing test. So it tells us the test suite name and the test name that failed. And it will also tell us the 2 values that are not equal to each other. And here it will tell us where this test failed. So it will tell us that it failed in moneytest.js at line 13. So if we go back to our code and we open the Jasmine moneytest.js, line 13 is right here. So it's just telling us that this line failed the test. Here we can see the full list of tests, and it will tell us that we have 3 tests, 2 of them passed, and 1 of them failed. So Jasmine gives us a lot of details on where a test failed to help us fix the issue. Now let's add back math.round to make everything pass again. We'll open our code and open utils/money.js, and we'll just add back capital M math.round, open bracket and close bracket, and save. And if we check our test page, everything passes again. So this is how we use a testing framework like Jasmine to create tests. The testing framework gives us a bunch of functions, such as describe, it, and expect, and then we use these functions to create our tests. So these functions have a lot of features inside them. They do all of the setup for us, and they also display the test on a nice web page for us. Now there's one more thing I want to mention, which is we can use describe inside describe. This helps us organize our tests further. So now let's save our changes into Git. We'll open the Git section, and let's close this file at the top for now. So inside moneytest.js, we created all the tests that we had before for format currency, but using Jasmine this time. And for spec runner, we renamed this file to test.html. And finally, we deleted all the test code that came with Jasmine. So now let's add a message to describe our changes. Remove default tests and add money tests and commit. Now let's test a different function using Jasmine. And along the way, we're going to learn some more features of testing frameworks. Let's go back to our code, and we're going to scroll to the top and open the data/cart.js file. So inside this file, we have a function called add to cart. So we're going to create tests for the add to cart function. First, since this function is in a different file, we're going to create a new test file. So we're going to scroll down, and let's close the test folder so we don't get confused. And then inside test-jasmine, we're going to click in this folder and then create a new file. And let's name it cart.test.js and press enter. So we name it the original file name, which is cart, and then just add test at the end. And to better organize our test files, we usually try to match the folder structure of the code. So for example, in our code, money.js is inside this utils folder. So inside our tests, we should also create a utils folder and put this file inside. So we'll create a new folder by clicking up here, and let's name it utils, and press enter, and then move the moneytest.js file inside. If it asks you if you want to update imports automatically, you can click yes. If you check your code, scroll to the top, make sure that your file path starts with //, because now we're inside another folder. VS Code sometimes updates the file path for us automatically, but if it doesn't, we can just add an extra // in front ourselves. And we're also going to open moneytest.js and save this file. Next, if we scroll up, cart.js is inside a data folder. So inside our tests, we're also going to create a data folder. Let's click cart_test.js. We'll create a new folder, and let's name this the data folder, and press enter. And then move cart_test.js inside here. Now, you'll notice that this folder structure doesn't perfectly match the folder structure that we have up here, because utils is inside the scripts folder. But usually this data folder should also be inside the scripts folder. I just made a mistake when structuring the project. So let's just use this folder structure in our tests. Okay, so now let's open cart_test.js, and now we're ready to test the add to cart function. So first, let's import add to cart at the top. We'll import curly brackets add to cart from a string, and we're going to locate cart.js. So first, we need to get out of the data folder using // and then get out of the test-jasmine folder, // and we'll go into this data folder, data/cart.js. Next, let's create a test suite for this function. So we'll create some new lines, and to create a test suite in Jasmine, we'll use the function describe, brackets, and we'll give this test suite a name by giving it a string. So let's use the name test suite : add to cart. And we'll give it a second parameter, which is a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And now inside this test suite, we're going to add some tests. So let's look at the code for add to cart to see what kind of tests we should add. So we'll open data/cart.js. And then inside add to cart, you'll notice that this function uses an if statement. A best practice in testing is to test each condition of the if statement. This is known as test coverage. Test coverage means how much of the code is being tested. And a best practice is we try to maximize test coverage. So for this if statement, we'll create a test for the first condition, which is when the product is already in the cart. And we'll create a test for the else condition, when the product is not in the cart. Let's go back to cart_test.js. And inside this test suite, we're going to create a test using the function int, brackets, and we'll give it a string. And this will be the test name. So for the video, I'm just going to scroll up and take this cart.js file and put it at the top here, so we can see our code and our tests side by side. So I'm going to scroll down to the add to cart function, and we mentioned that we're going to test each condition of this if statement. So the first test is going to be when the product is already in the cart. So down here, let's name it adds an existing product to the cart, comma, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And let's add another test for when the product is not in the cart, so this else condition. So down here, we'll create another test using it, brackets, and a string, and the test name adds a new product to the cart, comma, and a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. So these are the two tests that we need for the two conditions of this if statement. Let's actually start with adding a new product to the cart, since it's a little easier to test. Now, unlike the format currency function, add to cart doesn't return a value, so we can't really compare it to another value using expect. Instead, we're going to call add to cart to modify the cart, and then check if this cart looks correct. To do that, inside here, let's call the function add to cart, brackets. And this function takes one string, which is the product ID. So inside here, let's give it a string. And to find a product ID that we can test with, we're going to go to the left and scroll up. And we're going to open the data/products.js file. And inside here, we have a list of products. So let's just take the first product ID and use it in our test. We're going to select this ID and right-click, copy, and then inside cart test.js, in this string, we're going to right-click and paste. So this will add this product ID to the cart. And now to check if this code is working correctly, we're going to check what the cart looks like. So first we need to import the cart. We're going to scroll up, and since we're already importing from cart.js, to import the cart, we can type a comma cart. And then at the bottom here, we're going to create a new line. And first, let's check if the cart.length is correct. So if we assume that we start with an empty cart, when we add a product for the cart, we can type a comma cart. And then at the bottom here, we're going to create a new line. And first, let's check if the cart.length is correct. So if we assume that we start with an empty cart, when we add a product, the cart.length should be 1. So we can compare these two values, cart.length and 1. So to compare values, we're going to use the function expect brackets, and we'll compare the cart.length. And then here, we'll use the method .to equal brackets 1. So now let's save this file, and we're going to run these tests. To run them, we're just going to load this file inside test.html. So we'll open this, and then at the bottom, we'll create a script tag, give it a source attribute, double quotes, and we're going to load this file. So this file is inside the data folder, so we need to type data / to go into the folder, and then load cart test.js. And this file also uses import. So we're going to give it the attribute type equals module to enable JavaScript module features. And one thing that I forgot to do is we move money test into the utils folder. So we need to update the source attribute to add the utils folder, and then / to go into the folder, and then locate moneytest.js. So now let's save this HTML file and open this test page in our browser. And now we should have 2 additional tests. And the test that we just created should fail. If it doesn't fail for you, you can go into your console and run local storage.clear, and then refresh the page, and it should fail. So this tells us that the failure happened in the test suite add the cart, in the test adds a new product to the cart, which is the one we just created. So it's telling us that the cart.length is not equal to 1, it's equal to a different number. So why is this happening? Let's go back to our test, open cart.test.js, and in here, remember that we assumed the cart starts as empty, and if we add a product, the cart.length would be 1. However, the cart doesn't actually start as empty. In cart.js, at the top here, we're loading the cart from local storage. If there's nothing in local storage, we use this default cart. So our starting cart depends on what's inside local storage. And this is a big problem when testing, because local storage can change. If there's an empty cart saved in local storage, our test will pass. But if there's not an empty cart in local storage, then this test will fail. This is known as a flaky test, a test that sometimes passes and sometimes fails, even if we don't change the code. Now, to solve this problem, we're going to use a feature of Jasmine called mocks. A mock lets us replace a method with a fake version, and then we can make the fake version do anything we want. For example, when we load the cart from local storage, we're using local storage.getItem. So we can use a mock to create a fake version of getItem, and then we can make this fake version do anything we want, like return an empty array. So let's go ahead and create our first mock. We'll go back to carttest.js, and at the top of this test, we're going to create a mock using another function of Jasmine called spy on and brackets. And we'll give spy on two parameters. The first parameter is the object that we want to mock. In our case, it's local storage. So we'll type local storage, comma, and then we'll give it a string. And this string will be the method that we want to mock. In our case, we want to mock the getItem method. So here we'll type getItem. And make sure I is uppercase so that we exactly match the method name. So now this will replace local storage.getItem with a fake version. And we can make this fake version do anything we want. To do that, spy_on gives us an object. And this object has a property we can use. So at the end, we'll type dot and the property called and. And this result is also an object. And this object has a method called dot call fake brackets. So don't worry about all the dots here. Jasmine just organizes this code so that it reads like English. So we're spying on local storage.getItem and call fake. So next we're going to give call fake a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And this function is what we want getItem to do. So we're essentially overriding the original getItem with whatever is inside this function. So earlier, we said we wanted getItem to return the empty array for this test. So inside this fake function, let's make getItem return the empty array. Now remember that local storage only supports strings, so we need to return this as a string. To do that, we're going to use the code JSON, all uppercase, dot stringify, open bracket, and close bracket. So this will convert whatever's in the brackets to a JSON string, and that's what we need for local storage. So now let's test out this mock to see if it works. Below this, we're going to console.log brackets and run local storage.get capital I item brackets the string cart. Let's save this file and then open the test page in our browser. And we're going to open the console. So right click, inspect, and the console. And you'll see that here, local storage.getItem is no longer loading from the actual local storage. It's giving us an empty array every time. So now we have mocked the getItem method. However, you'll also notice that our test is still failing. So how come it still fails? To understand what's happening, let's take a closer look at our code. We'll go back to our code. And inside our test, here we're mocking local storage.getItem. But notice that above this, if we scroll up, we import the cart at the top. So the order of this code matters. First, we load the cart from local storage, and after, we're mocking local storage.getItem. So the cart is already loaded at this point, and this code doesn't have the effect that we want. So one way to solve this problem is after we mock local storage here, we should reload the cart. So inside cart.js, just gonna give it a little more space. To reload this cart after we mock, we just need to rerun all of this code. So let's create a function so we can rerun this code. At the bottom here, we'll create a function,
What the fuck is happening?
and we'll call it load from storage, brackets and curly brackets. And we're just going to move all of this code inside the function. So let's select all the code up to cart equals. We'll right click, cut, and then in the function, we'll right click and paste. And at the top, let's create the cart variable again. Let cart and semicolon. And lastly, when we load this file, we need to run this function so that we run this code at least once. So down here, we'll just run this function, load, and let cart variable, paste. And at the top, let's create the cart variable again. Let cart and semicolon. And lastly, when we load this file, we we need to run this function so that we run this code at least once. So down here, we'll just run this function, load from storage and brackets. So let's save. So we're basically running the exact same code as before, except this code is now inside a function. And now in our tests, after we mock local storage.getItem, we're going to reload the cart using this function. So first let's export it so we can use it in our test. We'll type export and save this file. And inside our test, let's scroll up to the top. We're already importing from cart.js, so we'll type a comma and we'll import load from storage. And then we'll scroll down back to our test. And here, after we mock local storage.getItem, we're going to load from storage, brackets, and save. So this time, we mock local storage.getItem first to return an empty array. And then when we reload the cart, this is going to be an empty array. And the cart will be empty. And now in our test, when we add a product to an empty cart, the cart length will be equal to 1. So this test will pass. So we can actually remove the console.log here and save and check our test page. And now this test should be passing. Next, let's go back to our code. And if we look at the add to cart function in cart.js, so in here, at the bottom of this function, you'll notice that we're saving the cart to local storage. So this is going to call local storage.setItem. However, we don't actually want to save to local storage because this is just test code. We don't want our test code to be modifying local storage or affecting our real code. To prevent this, we're also going to mock local storage.setItem. So down here, we're going to create some new lines at the top of the test, and we're going to mock local storage.setItem using the function spy on brackets, and we'll give it local storage, comma, a string, and the method we want to mock, which is set item, and save. And remember, the order of the code matters. So we want to mock local storage.setItem first, and then we call add to cart. So now setItem will be replaced with a fake version, and this will no longer save to local storage. Next, spy-on has another useful feature, which is it records every time a method is used. For example, what if we want to make sure that add to cart saves the cart to local storage at the end? In our tests, setItem is mocked, so we can't really check what's inside the local storage. Instead, we can just check if add to cart calls setItem at some point. To check if setItem was called, at the bottom, we can use the function expect, brackets, and we're going to give this the method that we mocked, which is local storage.setItem. And remember that expect gives us an object, and this object has many useful methods to check stuff, like .toEqual. So another method we get from expect is .to have been called times, brackets. So make sure that you write this method in camel case. To is lowercase, and every word after starts with a capital. So this method checks how many times local storage.setItem was called in the code above. So we expect it to be called once inside add to cart. So we're going to give it the number 1. So keep in mind that this only works if this method has been mocked with spy on. So now let's save and open our test page, and you can see that all of our tests passed. And local storage. setItem was called once.
I have no idea.
So after we mock a method, we can check how many times this method was called. And we can even check what values this method received, but I'll leave that as an exercise. Another thing you'll notice here is that each test can have multiple expectations, and the test will only pass if all of its expectations pass. Now let's add a few more expectations to this test for practice. So one thing we can check is we can check the first product in the cart and make sure that its product ID matches this string here. So below this, let's use another expect brackets, and we're going to check the first product in the cart using cart square bracket 0. So this is going to be an object, and this object is going to have a property called product ID. So down here, we'll get the dot product ID. And we're going to check if this product ID is equal to this string. So to do that, we'll use the dot to equal method, brackets, and we'll give it this string here. So let's just select this and right click, copy, and here, right click and paste. Another thing that we can check is the quantity. When we add a new product to the cart, the quantity should start out as 1. So down here, we're going to add another expect brackets, and we're going to check the first product, cart square bracket 0 dot quantity dot to equal brackets 1, and save. Now let's open our test page, and you can see that all of those expectations passed.
Okay, so why is this failing?
Now let's open our test. Page.
Why is this not working? Why is it undefined? What is it called? Where did the error go? Uh, why is quantity undefined? So it's because his is like the simple. So basically, the reason that didn't work is because my add to cart requires quantity too. Because it's one of the exercises where like you update the quantity, but then if you look at the, the test video that he's doing, every time add to cart is called, it just increases the quantity by one instead of like for example, if the user picked the quantity as 2, mine will update it to 2, but his just updates it to 1. Uh, yeah, that was one of like the challenge exercises.
And you can see that all of those
Yeah.
expectations passed. Now let's move on and create the test for adding an existing product to the cart. So we'll go back to our code and scroll up to the first test here. So first, we need to set up the cart so that it already contains the product that we want to add. To do that, we're going to mock local storage.getItem again. So down here, we can just reuse this code. So we're going to select this code and right-click, copy, and then in the first test here, right-click and paste. And this time, to set up the test, we're going to put a product into the cart at the beginning. And then we're going to add the same product to the cart. So inside this cart array, let's add an object. And each product has a property called product ID. So we're going to add this property, product ID, colon, and let's just give the same product ID that we used down here. So we'll select this, and then right-click, copy, and then up here, we're going to right-click and paste, comma, and each product also has a quantity. So we'll give it a quantity, colon, and let's just give it 1, comma, and also a delivery option. So delivery option ID, colon, and let's just give it the string 1, and save. So now when we do local storage.getItem, it will give back this array as the starting cart. And then we need to make sure that we reload.
So, that makes sense. It's just gonna fake it. It's not actually gonna do it. It's gonna act like it did, but it didn't actually do it. So like over here, when it says local storage as set item, it's gonna the cart is just gonna be like, okay, I ran this code, but really it was just like it returns nothing because it didn't return anything. This one is calling fake. Got it.
Load the cart from storage.
That makes some sense.
Next,
actually.
let's go down and let's copy the rest of the test because it's going to be very similar. So we're going to select this code and right-click, copy, and then up here, create some new lines, and right-click, and paste. And up here, and right-click, copy, and then up here,
from storage, and passes as that, and we can press all this.
create some new lines, and right-click, and paste. And also one thing I forgot to copy over is to mock local storage.setItem. So at the top, let's also spy on brackets, local storage, comma, a string, set item. So a mock only lasts for one test. Once that test is finished, the method is no longer mocked. So that's why in this test, we also have to mock local storage.setItem. And now, in this test, we're just going to modify these expectations so that they make sense for this test. If we add an existing product to the cart, the cart.length will still equal 1 because these product IDs match, and we're just increasing the quantity. We're still going to call local storage.setItem once, so this is correct still. The first item in the cart is going to have this product ID, and the only thing we're going to change is that the quantity is now going to increase by 1. So it's going to go from 1 to 2 this time. So everything is the same, except if we add an existing product, we're just increasing the quantity. Now let's save and check the test page. And now the existing product test is passing. And that's it. We created tests for the add to cart function. So now let's do some cleanup. And we're actually going to remove everything from local storage since we were modifying it earlier in the test and we might have messed it up. So on this page, we're going to right click, inspect, and open the console. And to remove everything from local storage, we're going to type the code local S storage dot clear and brackets and press enter. And then we'll refresh the page. Now finally, let's go into Git and save our changes. So we'll open our code and we can close this one for now. And we'll open the Git section. So in cart.js, at the top, we basically put all the code that loads the cart into a function so we can use it in our tests. And then here we moved moneytest.js into a utils folder. In test.html, we're loading the new cart.test.js file. And then inside cart.test.js, we added some tests for the add to cart function. So now let's create a message describing these changes. Create automated tests for add to cart and commit. The last thing we're going to learn in this lesson is how to create more complicated tests. So far, we've only been testing a single function. For example, we tested the add to cart function as well as a format currency function. So these are called unit tests because we're only testing one unit or one piece of the code. Now, what if we want to test a whole page or part of a page? This requires a more complicated test called an integration test. An integration test tests many units of code or pieces of code working together. For example, in our code, we're going to go to scripts/checkout/the order summary.js file. And we're going to test this render order summary function. So this function creates a whole section on the checkout page, and it uses many different functions and libraries to create the page. So testing this function will be considered an integration test because it uses many different pieces of code or units of code together. So let's start by creating a test file for this function. So this is in the order summary.js file. Inside our test here, let's match the file structure that we have here. So we're going to click test-jasmine. First, we're going to create a checkout folder. So we'll click here to create a folder, and we're going to name it checkout, and press enter. And then inside the checkout folder, we're going to create a new file. So we'll click this to create a new file, and we'll name it the same as above, order summary, and add test.js, and press enter. So by matching the file structure, it's clear that this test file is going to test order summary.js. And again, for the video, I'm just going to drag this file to the top here, so we can see this and the test side by side. And now we're going to test this render order summary function. So first we're going to import this function into our test file. At the top, we'll import curly brackets, the render order summary function from a string, and we're going to locate this file. So first we need to get out of the checkout folder and out of the test-jasmine folder. So we'll use two // And then we're going to go into the scripts folder and into the checkout folder, scripts/checkout/ and we'll load order summary.js. We'll create some new lines, and let's start by creating a test suite using the function describe brackets. And inside we'll give it a string, and we'll name this test suite test suite : render order summary, a comma and a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And now, what test cases should we create? Render order summary creates a part of the page. So when we're testing a page, the two things we need to test is how the page looks and how the page behaves. Let's start by testing how the page looks. Inside our test suite, we're going to create a test using it, brackets, and we'll name this test with a string, and this will just be a basic test case. So we'll describe what this function does, which is displays the cart, comma, and we'll give it a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And now we're ready to create the test. So render order summary usually displays the cart on the page. However, in our tests, where does this cart get displayed? So if we look at the code in this function, and we scroll down, here we generate the HTML for the cart, and then after we generate the HTML, we put the HTML inside an element with the class js-order-summary. However, we don't have this element in our tests. So to fix this, we're just going to create an element with the class js-order-summary. To do this, we're going to scroll down, and we're going to open the test.html file. And then at the bottom, we're going to go to the body, and then inside here, we're going to create a div. So less than div and greater than. And then inside here, we're going to create, and at the bottom, we're going to go to the body, and then inside here, we're going to create a div. So less than div and greater than. So remember how we said we need to create an element with the class js-order-summary? We're going to create that element and put it inside of this div. So this div is going to act like a container. The reason we use a container is that when we create elements in our test, we don't want to be modifying the entire body, because the body might contain our test results from Jasmine. So we put everything inside a container. So now let's give this div a class so we can use it in our JavaScript. We're going to give it a class equals double quotes, and we're going to call this the js-test-container. To make it clear, this is a container for all of our test code. And save. And now let's get this container into our tests. We can do that using document.querySelector, brackets, and a string, and we'll select the class using a .js-test-container. And then inside this container, we're going to create an element with the class js-order-summary. So to put something inside this element, we're going to use the property .inner capital HTML equals a template string. And inside this template string, let's create a div element, less than div greater than, less than slash div greater than. And as we mentioned, we'll give this element a class equals double quotes of js-order-summary. So this basically takes this HTML and puts it inside our test container. So it will put it inside here. And now we have the element that we need for render order summary. So when we call this function, it's going to create the cart and display it in this element here. Next, if we look at the code for render order summary, and we scroll to the top, you'll notice that it takes the cart and then displays it on the page. But remember that by default, we load this cart from local storage, and this can cause problems in our test, depending on what is inside local storage. So to fix this, we're going to mock local storage.getItem again to control exactly what's inside this cart. So let's actually open the cart test that we had before, and we're just going to copy-paste this mock that we created. So we're going to start from here, this function, and we're going to select the code up to spy on getItem, and then right-click, copy, and then down here, we're going to right-click and paste. And one other thing we need to do here is we don't have access to paste. Up to spy on getItem, and then right-click, copy, and then down here, we're going to right-click and paste. And one other thing we need to do here is we don't have access to load from storage right now, so we need to import it. At the top, let's also copy the import that we had here. So we're going to select this, and then right-click, copy, and then down here, we're going to right-click and paste the import. And we just need to make sure that this file path locates cart.js. So ///, it's going to go outside checkout and outside test-jasmine, and then it will go inside the data folder, and then locate cart.js. So this file path is correct. And currently we're not using these two values, so we can just remove them. And now let's set up this cart for this test. So we could just use this cart here. However, to make our test a little more detailed, let's open the cart.js file. And at the top here, we're going to use this default cart instead, because it has two products with different quantities, so we can test more things. So we're just going to select this cart here, and then right-click, copy, and then down here, open order summary test, and we're going to select this cart and remove it. And inside these brackets, we're going to right-click and paste that default cart. And now that the HTML and the cart is set up for this function, at the bottom, we can call the function render order summary and brackets and save. So now let's run this test file. We're going to open test.html, and then beneath these tests, we're going to add another script tag, less than script source equals, and we'll load the checkout slash order summary test.js file. And we need to give it the attribute type equals module because we used imports. And let's save, so we run this test. So we'll open our test page, and you can see that the cart was rendered onto this test page. And we still have our Jasmine results at the bottom here. So you notice that when we render this, it didn't load any CSS or images. And this is okay, because we can't really use code to check if the page visually looks correct. However, we can use this to check the contents of the page, like if the products and the quantities are correct. So first, our cart has two products in it. So we can check if there were two products that were rendered on the page. Let's go back to our tests. And let's take a look at the order summary.js file. And when we render the order summary, we scroll down. For each product in the cart, we create an element with the class cart-item-container. Since we have two products in the cart, let's check that we created two of these elements on the page. So we're going to open the order summary tests.js file. And then in the first test, at the bottom of this test, we're going to add some lines, and we're going to check if we have two of these elements. To do that, we can use the DOM using document.query selector all brackets and a string. And we could select the class cart-item-container. However, this class is used for CSS. So remember, if we're going to use a class in JavaScript, we start with JS-. Let's add a new class to this element that we can use for the test. We'll add js-cart-item-container. So now we're going to select all the elements with this class using .js-cart-item-container. And let's save the order summary.js file. And then down here, we're going to check if we have two of these elements on the page. So again, to check something in our tests, we're going to use the function expect, open bracket, and let's create a new line to make it a little cleaner. And at the end, we'll give a close bracket like this. And this code gives us an array of elements. So here, we're going to check if the dot length of this is equal to 2. So expect gives us an object which has a method called dot to equal, brackets, and 2. So this checks if we have two of these elements on the page. So let's save, and then check the test page, and scroll to the bottom, and you'll see that this test passed. So that's how we check if we rendered the page correctly. Next, let's do another check of what we rendered on the page. So another thing we can test is if the product quantities are correct. So first, we need to get this quantity element into our tests. So we'll go back to our code, and then inside the HTML of the order summary, we're going to scroll down until we see a div with the class product-quantity, and we're displaying the quantity here. So now we're going to take this element, put it into our test, and check that the quantity here is correct. So to do that, let's give another class to this element so we can select it using JavaScript. So here, we'll add another class, js-product-quantity. And we want to check the quantity for each product. So we need to identify which product this is for. We can do that by adding a dash to this class and then inserting, using dollar and curly brackets, the product's ID, which is the matching product dot ID, and save. And now let's get this element into our tests. So down here, we're going to document.query selector, brackets, and we'll give it a template string because we're going to insert a product ID. So we're going to select this class using a .js-product-quantity dash, and then insert the product ID. So in our cart, we have two products, and let's start with the first product ID. Now, to make this easier, let's put this string inside a variable so we can reuse it below. So above this, let's create a variable with const, call it product ID 1 equals, and we're going to select this ID, and then right-click, cut, and then up here, right-click and paste. And then we're just going to use this variable down here. Product ID 1. And then when we're getting this element into our code, we're also going to insert the product ID. Which is product ID 1. But now we're going to check if the text inside is correct. So for the first product, we have a quantity of 2. So the text inside this element should say quantity colon 2. So to check this, at the bottom of our test, as usual, we're going to use the function expect, open bracket, and a new line. And then here we can remove the semicolon and close bracket. And we're going to get the text inside of this element. Now we're not going to use .inner.html because this element contains a bunch of HTML inside, but we only want the text. To get just the text, we're going to use the property .inner.text. So we expect the text inside this element to contain quantity colon 2. However, this element also has some other text like update and delete. So we just want to check if quantity 2 is somewhere inside this element. So how do we check that? However, this element also has some other text like update and delete. So we just want to check if quantity 2 is somewhere inside this element. So how do we check that? To do that, we're going to use a different method of expect called .toContain and brackets. And we're going to give it the string that we want to check for, which is capital Q quantity colon 2. So the toContain method checks if this value contains this string. So they don't have to be an exact match like with.
How does that work?
To equal. As long as quantity colon 2 is somewhere in this element, then this expectation will pass. And this is exactly what we need when this element has some extra text that we don't really need to check. So now let's click our test file and save and open the test page. And scroll to the bottom, and you'll notice that the test passed. So for the first product, we're displaying the quantity of 2 correctly. Let's also check the quantity of the second product. We'll go back to our tests, and just like before, let's create a variable to store this ID. So we'll create a variable with const product ID2 equals, and we'll select this ID and right click copy, and then here right click and paste. And then we'll remove this and use the variable product ID2. And then at the bottom, we're going to get the quantity element for product 2. So let's just copy this code because it's very similar. We'll select it, right click copy, and then down here, right click and paste. So this time we're going to get the quantity element for product ID 2. And in our cart, product 2 has a quantity of 1. So down here, we're going to check if the text contains quantity colon 1 and save. And let's open our test page and scroll to the bottom, and this test passed. So we're displaying the quantity of both products correctly on the page. The second thing we can test in an integration test is how the page behaves. For example, on this page, we can click the delete link to remove a product from the page. So let's create a new test to make sure that the delete link behaves correctly. We'll open our test code, and at the bottom, we're going to create a new test using the function it and brackets. We'll give it a name, and let's describe what the behavior should be, which is removes a product, comma, and a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. Now let's do the same setup as the first test. So we start with 2 products in the cart. So we can select from load from storage, and we'll select all of this code up here, and then right click. Copy, and at the bottom, we're going to right click and paste. So this will set up the HTML element that we need for the order summary, as well as the cart. And after this, let's render the order summary using the function render order summary and brackets. So once we've displayed this on the page, we're going to get the delete link and click it. So first, let's get the delete link into our code. So we'll go to the order summary.js file, and inside the HTML, we're going to scroll down a bit till we see the delete quantity link. And let's test the delete link for the first product in the cart. So first, we need to add a class to this element so we know which product this is for. So here, we're going to add a class js-delete-link- and insert the product ID, which is the matching product .id. And I'll add a new line to make the code a little bit cleaner. And now we can save. And then down here, we're going to get the delete link for the first product ID. So at the bottom, we use document.query selector brackets, and we'll give it a template string because we're going to insert the product ID, and we'll select this class using .js-delete-link- and then insert $curly brackets product ID 1. And now we need to click this delete link to remove the first product from the page and from the cart. To click an element using code, we can just get it using the DOM, and then use the method .click and brackets. So this will click delete on the first product and remove it. So let's save and take a look at our test page. And unfortunately, this test failed. So let's take a look at the details of the failure to figure out how to fix it. So it's telling us that we cannot set properties of null. This means that a value in our code is null, and we're trying to give it a property. And here, it will tell us which line we got this error from. So this error happened in our test file, and the line that created this error was in order summary.js on line 132, or whatever line that you see here on your page. So inside our code, we're going to open order summary.js, and I'm going to scroll down to line 132, and you can scroll down to the line that you got on your page. So this line of code is actually part of the code that we run when we click delete. So remember that when we click delete, we also update the payment summary on the right side of the page. And that's what this line does. Now the reason this is not working is if we open the payment summary.js file and we look at what this does, at the bottom, after we generate the HTML, we try to put the HTML in an element with a class js-payment-summary. And this element does not exist in our test. So one way to fix this is to add this element to our tests. So let's open our test again. We'll open the order summary test.js, and then we'll scroll up. And then here, when we create the order summary element, we're also going to create the payment summary element. So we'll create a less than div greater than, less than slash div greater than, and here we'll give it a class equals double quotes, and we'll give it the class that the payment summary needs, which is js-payment-summary, and save. So now that the payment summary element is set up, we can open our test page, and our test should no longer happen.
So it's a similar error, but basically over here I'm rendering the header too. He isn't rendering the header in the tutorial. So I've just got to add JS return a home link honestly. I can just add this to wherever just all shift. This needs to be. Can I mark it?
Have a failure. So you also notice that the payment summary got rendered or displayed on the page. Okay, so in our test, we only clicked the delete link for the first product, but we didn't actually check if the page looks correct. And that's what it shows here with this yellow dot. This test has no expectations yet. So let's go back to our test and add some expectations at the bottom. So we'll scroll down, and down here, after we click delete for the first product, we expect that there's only one element left on the page for the cart. So in our first test, we actually had a check for this. So we can scroll up, and here we check if we have two cart item containers on the page. So let's just reuse this check because it's very similar. We'll select it, right-click, copy. So let's also we'll go from container for the first product. We use document.query selector, brackets.
Okay, so math set properties of null. So basically calculate. Okay, I'm getting it. So trying to set inner HTML at 7 during checkout header.js, but basically this is giving us null right now. Oh shit. I have no idea how to solve that though. Can I mock it? I don't know. Uh, so I'm gonna try to mock this basically. So ask Claude, let's see if it can try to do something. Let original calculate is equal to window and call for function. Okay, so it's asking me to. Okay, let me just put this on the screen. Look at what Claude says. Okay, before each function, original calculate is a window. Create a global window object, spy on the global window object, and call fake function, return 5. After each function, we wanna, I don't know what this is. Restore the original function after each test. So is it like modifying the original function? How does that work? So this is. I'm trying to figure this out. Let me just try. Okay. So. So. So we expect to remove a product.
and again, we use
I think I made a stupid
is no longer on the page. And now this test path, we're going to right click and paste. And this time, we only expect one cart item container to be left on the page. So we'll change this to our test and add some expectations. For test, we only clicked the delete link for the first product, but we didn't actually check if the page looks correct. And that's what it shows here with this yellow dot. This test has no expectations yet. So let's go back to our test and add some expectations at the bottom. So we'll scroll down, and down here, and here, we'll give it a class equals double quotes.
Yeah, I might have made that mistake, honestly. What was the name of just... So if I take this, right, if I take this, let me turn off this keyboard. Right, and I put this here. Right, so there we go. I didn't need to do that then. That was just stupid of me. Where's my cloud? I'll put cloud back. Yeah, okay.
And we'll give it the class that the payment summary needs, which is js-payment-summary.
So once
and
we do
save.
this, okay, let me try to do this on my own now. Okay, so once we do this, right? What do you expect? You want to expect this, right? And we click on it. And
So now that the payment summary element is set up, we can open our test page and exploit. And only we had a we're going one cart.
No, so we don't expect this. So once it's saying, okay, I've clicked on it, and then what happens, right? So I've clicked on this. Move this up, and then after I've clicked on it, I expect, right? And what do I expect? I expect the document.query selector, right? And then who are we taking? We're taking the thing all actually. We're taking the JS cart item container, right? And then we expect the length of it to equal to 1 because I've deleted 1, and then should I pass that fucking bastard
Item container to be left on the page. So we'll change this to 1. So we'll save, open the test page, scroll down, and now this test passed. Let's also do a more detailed check. So we're going to check that the first product is no longer on the page. We'll go back to our tests. And then down here, we're going to get the cart item container for the first product. We use document.
I can't believe that worked. That's what even I was thinking. Why is it not? I was trying to mock it.
Dot query selector brackets. And to get the element for the first product, we're going to open ordersummary.js and then scroll up in the HTML until we find the cart item container element. And we're going to look for this class right here, which tells us which product this element is for. So in here, we'll give it a template string because we'll insert the product ID, and we'll look for this class using a dot js-cart-item-container- and insert the first product, so product ID 1. And because we removed this product from the page, we expect this result to be null. So we'll use the function expect, open bracket, and a new line, and then down here, a close bracket, and we'll use the method dot to equal brackets, and we expect
we want this to equal null.
this to be null, and save. Let's also check that the second product is still on the page because we didn't delete it. So
okay, okay, we literally can just we can just copy this, right, to see if the second product is that mistake. How did I do that? I don't know how I did that shortcut, whatever it was. Sorry. So, and we want this to go up. And let's go shift alt, get this down here. And we expect the product ID 2. Right, and we want this to equal the product ID 2. And this will work too.
let's just make a copy for not equal to null. In Jasmine, to check if something is not equal to, expect gives us another property we can use called dot not.
Alright, that's pretty stupid.
So if we use the dot not property, it will check the opposite of whatever is next. So this will check if this value is not equal to null.
Let me just
So remember, the code for Jasmine is designed to read like English. Let's save and check the test page and scroll down.
Oh, fuck.
And this test passed. So we're
Why does the second one disappear? Is my question. Why does the second one disappear? Right, so the moment I click delete on a console at 71 60. Okay, so card.js60, which is remove from card. Okay. Uh, I was trying to get rid of this one. Why is it still there? All this freaking debugging is really making my brain hurt. Why? Oh, Jesus. When you click the delete link, the code, the only thing that's left in the code. That's correct. We click the delete link, and then it logs the card at 60, and it tells me it's 71. I gotta go to card.js 60. See if I got 60. There we go. Wait, no. There we go. Nope, there's the test. There we go. So we'll remove it. The only thing that's left. Okay, let me just inspect this and see what the pain. Yeah. So the only thing that's left is cart.js card item container cart.js class. It says js card item container. Okay, all this is a problem. How to do a global search in VS. Let's go. Control Shift F. I'm gonna change this. So this is supposed to be cart item container. This is supposed to be just cart item container. This is gonna be the just cart item container. What's left? This is gonna be cart item container. Okay. So this is right now. This I want to save this and get actually first order summary controls. Right. Fetch new bug from this is gone. Now this is cool. This is supposed to not equal null. This pass. That passed. That passed. Yep, it passed. Cool.
Displaying the correct products on the page after deleting. Now there's one more thing.
Oh, okay. This has been a long stream. I'm gonna save these changes in the Git really quick. This is like a small stupid change. This is like load. That's fine. And then test.html. This is the main thing. So added test for the checkout order some page. Okay, and I'm gonna take a break and eat something maybe. I will see you guys. Oops, I opened Valorant by mistake.